Welcome to Mathmania Academy. In this video, we are going to discuss linear algebra questions which were asked in June 2009. The first question, PA of x denote the characteristic polynomial of the matrix A. Then for which of the following matrices some quantity, that characteristic polynomial of A minus characteristic polynomial of A inverse. Okay, so that is a typographical. This has to be a constant one. Okay, you are very well able to see that among the four options given, uh, only one is going to be right, since it is a part B question, and all the given options are 2 by 2 matrices. So characteristic polynomial of a 2 by 2 matrix can be very well written as x square minus trace of that matrix multiplied with x plus determinant of the matrix. Okay, we can very well write this one. So then what would be the characteristic polynomial of A inverse? That is trace square minus, sorry, x square minus trace of A inverse x plus determinant of A inverse. We are expecting this quantity P of x minus P A inverse of x to be some constant. When is it possible? It is possible. Okay, let us just subtract these two quantities and see what should be the expected thing. Minus x square minus of minus plus trace A inverse x minus determinant of A inverse. This should be constant. Okay, so from which what we get is trace of A inverse minus trace of A product with x plus determinant of A minus determinant of A inverse. This should be constant. Yes, this determinant quantity is constant, that we know, right? So the thing is that from which what we infer is that trace of A inverse should be same as that of trace of A. Okay, if your A, let us take it as ABCD as the matrix, then trace of A is simply A plus D. Okay, how do you find A inverse? That is 1 upon determinant of A into adjoint of A. So 1 upon AD minus BC. We just interchange these things and sign off this one. So from which the trace of A inverse is what? Trace of A inverse is uh, A plus D divided by AD minus BC, isn't it? Okay, we should get these two quantities to be equal. If these two quantities to be equal, then we must get this AD minus BC. This AD minus BC should be equal to 1. Am I right? So this has to be the case. So that means determinant of A should be equal to 1 in order to get this trace of A and A inverse to be equal. So you just find out the determinant of the given matrices. This is 16 minus, this is 16 minus 6, which is, sorry, 12 minus 6, which is 6. Here again 12 minus 6, 6. 9 minus 8, 1. Here 8 minus 9, minus 1. So option 3. Right? Moving to the next question. Here we are asked to identify a matrix which is not diagonalizable over R. Okay, when do we get a matrix is diagonalizable? Excuse me. If the minimal polynomial of the particular matrix consists of only the linear factors, in that case the matrix is diagonalizable. If and only if. And the other way is to find the algebraic multiplicity and geometric multiplicity of the eigenvalues. If all the algebraic multiplicity is same as that of the geometric multiplicity, then the matrix is diagonalizable. Okay, it is also an if and only if case. In the first matrix, we have lambda is equal to 2 and lambda is equal to 3 are the eigenvalues. Since it is an upper triangular matrix, only these two entries are present in the diagonal elements, hence these are the eigenvalues. Okay, 3 is appearing only once, so we don't have to examine the algebraic multiplicity and geometric multiplicity since it is known to be 1, right? Now we know that algebraic multiplicity of lambda is equal to 2 is 2. Then we need to find out geometric multiplicity of lambda is equal to 2. That is nullity of the given matrix minus 2 times of identity. So the nullity of 0 0 1 0 1 0 0 0 0, isn't it? So the rank is 2, hence the nullity is 1. The algebraic multiplicity is different from the geometric multiplicity, hence the matrix is not diagonalizable. Okay, sorry, the matrix is not diagonalizable. That is the right option. Okay, we have examined the first matrix. From there itself, we got the answer. So it is not necessary to check the other options in the examinations. But when you're preparing for the examinations, let us examine all other options as well. Here, if you identify the characteristic polynomial, that would be x minus 1 whole square minus 1. Okay, so it would be x square minus 2x plus 1 minus 1. So it is x square minus 2x. So it is x times of x minus 2. We are able to see that we get two different eigenvalues. Matrices of order 2 by 2. We get two different eigenvalues. Hence it is diagonalizable over R. Okay. Here it is again an upper triangular matrix. Here lambda is equal to 2 appears only once. So we'll examine the algebraic and geometric multiplicity of the eigenvalue. Lambda is 3. Okay, geometric multiplicity of lambda is 3 is nullity of a minus 3i. So that is nullity of this is minus 1 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0. The rank is 1 and hence the nullity is 2. So this matrix is also diagonalizable. And here if you examine the characteristic polynomial, it is x square minus trace is 5 and the determinant is 4 plus 2 6. And if you see it is x minus 2 times of x minus 3, we get two different eigenvalues, hence the matrix is diagonalizable over R. Moving to the next question, we are asked to find out the rank of this matrix. Okay, the first thing that you have to do is R2 minus R1, do this elementary transformation. R3 is R3 minus R1, R4 is R4 minus R1, R5 R5 minus R1. After this, you will have to do R3 is R3 minus R2, R4 is R4 minus R2, then R5 minus R2, then R4 minus R3, R5 minus R3, and finally this R5 minus R4. If you perform these elementary transformations, you would obtain an upper triangular matrix with all the diagonal entries 1. Okay, you may have few other entries in the above diagonal, like you would get a matrix of something like this. You may have some non-zero entries here and you have 0 here. So it is trivial that the determinant of this matrix is non-zero. Hence the determinant of the given matrix should also be non-zero. Since this is a matrix of rank 5, the given matrix is also of rank 5. You just have to perform the elementary transformations and obtain this one. So the rank is 5. Moving to the next question. V is a vector space of real valued continuous functions in the closed interval 0 1. So basically what is our V? It is the functions such that this is defined from closed 0 to 1 to R. Okay, and F is continuous. and W is the subspace of V, which is spanned by sin x, cos x, tan x, where this alpha, beta, gamma are. Now we'll have to examine the dimension of V over R. Okay, basically this V is an infinite dimensional vector space, because if you try and find out the basis of this one, that collection will contain infinite number of elements. Okay, but okay, the question asks some subspace of V is given and you are asked to find out the dimension of the subspace. Now a general question or the conceptual question that arises that, can we have a finite dimensional vector space, finite dimensional subspace for an infinite dimensional vector space? Yes, it is possible. That is what we'll have to try and identify. Basically, we know that dimension of a subspace is always smaller than that of the dimension of the original space. Okay, if we have a finite dimensional vector space, then identifying the dimension of the subspace would be quite easy by knowing this one. Okay, here we have an infinite dimensional vector space, hence the dimension of the subspace can be any finite number or even infinite. Okay, now in order to check whether now we have to check the dimension of the subspace W, right? So first of all, we'll have to examine these are linearly independent. Okay, all we have to do is that we have to examine these are linearly independent. It is spanned by three different independent things, hence the dimension has to be equal to 3 if all are linearly independent. If only two of them are linearly independent, then the dimension would be 2. Okay, so that is what the idea is all about. Okay, let us check the independence. The sin x or cos x are okay. Here this x can take values only from 0 to 1, right? That is also trivial to us. So the function behaves non-zero throughout. It is non-zero, right? All these three functions are non-zero, hence the dimension is minimum 1 for sure. Okay, now we'll have to check the independence of this one, for which you can very well construct a Wronskian. Okay, so we are constructing Wronskian for three variables. If you differentiate this one cos x, this upon differentiation we get sin x, this upon differentiation we get secant square x, then this is minus sin x and this is minus cos x, this is 2 times of secant x, then tan x. Okay, this is what the Wronskian is. You just find out the determinant of this Wronskian and obtain this is non-zero. Okay, from which you can conclude these are linearly independent. This is one way. The other way is you can check the mutual independence of these vectors. Okay, let me choose v1 to be sin x, v2 to be cos x, and v3 to be tan x. So if I choose this way, then my v1 it is just a matter of simplicity. You can directly put sin x upon cos x and see it is tan x. Okay, v2 upon v3 is cos x upon tan x. That is going to give me some cos square x upon sin x, and v3 upon v1. This is remaining, right? So this is going to give me 1 upon cos x. Anyway, this is not a constant. This is again not a constant. This is not a constant. The value is different for different values of x. So all the three are not constants. So they are mutually independent. If they are mutually independent, then very well we can conclude these are linearly independent. Okay. So with that ideology, we are able to see all the three are linearly independent. Hence the dimension is 3. You may You may ask me, v1 upon v2 we are getting tan x, so with the help of v1 and v2 we are able to get the value of tan x. Then why should we consider the tan x as a linearly, why can't we consider the tan x as a linearly independent one? Here the linear independence talks about the summation. We are whenever we are checking some this, if when can we say this v3 is linearly dependent, which depends upon v1 and v2? Only when you can write this v3 as some alpha times of v1 plus beta times of v2. Okay, so we must perform only scalar multiplication and vector addition. If you are able to perform, if you are able to write some vector as a scalar multiple and vector addition of other two vectors, then that becomes linearly dependent. Okay, here we are checking, here what did we actually check? We are checking two vectors are linearly independent or not. For that, if one is a scalar multiple of other, if v1 is a scalar multiple of v2, then they are linearly dependent. Okay, so this is what we just simplified it as v1 upon v2. If we are getting this to be some scalar, then they are dependent. Okay, that is not happening here, and hence the dimension is 3. Moving to the next question. Here V is given to be a vector space of polynomials in a variability of degree at most 2 over R. Okay, so basically V consists of the polynomials in T, that is alpha naught plus alpha 1t plus alpha 2t square, where this alpha naught, alpha 1, alpha 2 are taken from R. Okay, an inner product on this vector space is defined like this. Okay, and we have a set W which is spanned by 1 minus t square and 1 plus t square. Of course, they are linearly independent. And W complement be the orthogonal complement of W in V, then which of the following are true? Okay, what do we mean by orthogonal complement? So this orthogonal complement is the collection of functions in W such that inner product f comma g is 0 for all g in W. Okay, actually this has to collect the functions from V, right? Yeah. So we are basically the orthogonal complement collects the functions in the collects the elements from the vector space. Okay, now here it is functions, right? Generally it collects the elements from the vector space such that the inner product of those elements with all the elements of the subspace should be equal to 0, right? Okay, then we'll have to examine which of the following conditions is satisfied for all H in W complement. Okay, so this is what we should do, right? Okay, basically W complement collects the functions from V. So this, let this H of t be a member of W complement. So basically this H of t is a function, this is a member in V. So this H of t can take the form a naught a1t plus a2t square. Okay, then this H of t is orthogonal to W, right? Therefore what we get is, it is W is which is spanned by 1 minus t square and 1 plus t square. Therefore inner product H of t with this 1 minus t square should be equal to 0, and this H of t comma 1 plus t square should also be equal to 0. Since it is spanned by these two things, all the elements in W will be a linear combination of these two things. Instead of having it to the general thing, we are taking it in two different things. Okay, only with the basis elements, if we just see, it is more than enough. It can be extended to the entire subspace. That is the ideology. So from the first one, what we are going to have is integral 0 to t. Your H of t is a naught a1t plus a2t square product with 1 minus t square dt is 0. So this is a0 plus a1t plus a2t square minus a0 t square minus a1t cube minus a2t power 4. Integral of this quantity is 0. So from which what are we going to get? We would get a0 t plus a1 t square upon 2. Then this a2 minus a0 t cube upon 3 minus a1 t power 4 upon 4 minus a2 t power 5 upon 5, which is 0. Right? Okay. Now, if we proceed here, this is interval 0 to t, a0 a1t plus a2t square product with 1 plus t square dt is 0. Okay, you would proceed the same way. Here you would get a0 t a1t square upon 2 plus a2 plus a0 t cube upon 3 plus a1 t power 4 upon 4 plus a2 t power 5 upon 5 is 0. Okay, if you mark this as equation 1 and this as equation 2, just by adding 1 and 2, what we get is twice a0 t plus a1 t square upon 2 plus a2 t cube upon 3. This quantity is 0. Okay, so basically a0 t, we can very well, if needed, okay, a0 t plus a1 t square upon 2 plus a2 t cube upon 3 is 0. Okay, when you subtract these two things, what are you going to get? 1 minus 2, or we'll write the way 2 minus 1. So we would get twice. Okay, all the positive quantities will get 0 and the negative quantities would be 2 times of, right? So a0 t cube upon 3 plus a1 t power 4 upon 4 plus a2 t power 5 upon 5. This quantity is 0. Okay, so basically we can use these two equations to get the values of a0. So from which what should we obtain is we should obtain the values of a0, a1 and a2. Okay, that is what we should obtain, for which it is quite simple. You just multiply a t square with it. Okay, we get this one. We can very well solve these things. Okay, you just multiply 1 upon 3 throughout. So since I don't have space, I am writing everything like this. So now I'll eliminate this a0. If I subtract this one, I'll eliminate a0. Then I would have a1 and a2 only. So from which you just obtain the actually this leads to a0 upon 3, a1 upon 6, a2 upon 18, and a0 upon 3, a1 upon 4, a2 upon 5. T cube, t power 4 and t power 5, 0, 0, 0. So basically if you see, you have a homogeneous equation in 3 variables, namely t cube, t power 4 and t power 5, which has only 2 equations. So it is very trivial that the rank of this matrix is 2. Okay, the rank is 2. If you know the rank is 2, you can very well just perform the elementary operations and see one function, two entries are linearly independent. Okay, so that you are able to identify and you can very well check. Okay, the thing is that you would get h of t as a function of only one thing. One, just a minute, let me try to work it out that as well. So when we perform a linear transformation here, sorry, elementary transformation here, we would get a naught upon 3, a1 upon 6, a2 upon 18, and this term would become 0. So 1 upon 6 minus, sorry, 1 upon 4 minus 1 upon 6, this would be 6 minus 4 upon 24. So 1 upon 12. So a1 upon 12 we get here, and here we would get 1 upon 5 minus 1 upon 18. So 18 minus 5 upon 90, which is 13 upon 90. So 13 a2 upon 90. If you just apply the back substitution, your a1 upon 12 is 13 a2 upon 90. Okay, this you would get, and from which you can get the value of a1 in terms of a1 would be a function of some a2. Okay, a1 is a function of a2, a2 is a2 itself. Therefore, this leads to a0 would also be a function, some other function of a2. Okay, so if we know the value of that a2, then we can very well write all this stuff, right? So that is there for sure. Okay, and so if you examine from here, you would get h of t is a polynomial. Okay, is a quadratic polynomial, and when you try to plot it, it will have a roots in real numbers. Okay, so this has a real solution. Okay, this will have a real solution, and if you don't substitute the value of this h of t, okay, we have assumed h of t takes this form. If you don't substitute, you would get integral h of t minus t square h of t is 0, and from here you would get integral h of t plus t square h of t is 0. Okay, when you add these two things, you would end up with 2 times of integral h of t dt is 0. Okay, so from which, if you have to remove the integration, you just differentiate. Okay, so that would be what, simply h of if you differentiate, you would get h of t is 0, and that tells you that here itself you can very well conclude that this has a real solution. And when you write down the explicit form with the help of this a2, you are able to see that your h is neither even function nor odd function, and at 0 it is not 0. Okay, moving to the next question, we are asked to consider the vector space of real polynomials in x degree less than or equals n. So this Pn is the set of all real polynomials of degree less than or equals n. And we are defining a map from P2 to P3 by this fashion. So the bases are given here itself. So T of 1 is what? Integral 0 to x dt plus the derivative of 1, which is 0. So it is simply x plus 0, that is x. Now you will have to express this x with the help of these coordinates. So it is 0, 1, 0, 0, right? And t of x is integral 0 to x t dt, and the derivative of x, it is t square upon 2 0 to x plus 1. It is 1 plus x square upon 2, and when we write it in this form it is 1 0 half 0, and t of x square is integral 0 to x t square dt plus d upon dx of x square, that is t cube upon 3 over the limit 0 to x plus 2x. So it is 2x plus x cube by 3. When you put it in this form, it is 0 to 0 1 upon 3. Okay, so the transpose of this has to be put. The matrix of T is 0 1 0 0 1 0 half times 0 0 2 0 1 upon 3. This is the right option. Okay, actually CSIR people have considered option 1 also a right option, because very few authors has considered, instead of considering it in the instead of considering it as a column vector, some people consider it as a row vector. When you consider it as a row vector, option 1 is also true, but it is always better for us to work with column vectors. If you are finding a, if you are applying a transformation to a basis vector, what you obtain finally is a column vector. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind and we'll work accordingly. So they have given both option 1 and 2 as a right options. Since they have not specified you to consider the resulting in a column manner, if in the question, if it is asked to consider in a row manner, then option 1 would be right. Okay, you just go through the question carefully, have both the ideas in mind, but prefer to work with column vectors. Okay, now we move to the part C questions. L of Rn be the space of R linear maps from Rn to Rn. Okay, here it means this collection, this L of Rn is the collection of mappings which are defined from Rn to Rn such that this is R linear. Okay, basically it is the collection of linear functions, linear maps, right? And kernel denotes the null space, and with which we'll have to examine which of the following are true. In all the options, what we are given is that range of T is same as that of kernel of T, right? If the range and kernel are same, then the dimension of range of T should be same as that of the dimension of kernel of T. Okay, that is rank of T and the nullity of the transformation are same. Let us take that as some m. Okay, by rank nullity theorem, what do we get? Rank of T plus nullity of T equals dimension of the domain space, which is n. So it is both are equal to m, right? So 2m equals n. So from which what we get is m is n upon 2. Okay, so these are just by looking at all the options, in all the options range and kernel are given to be equal. So with that one and simply using the rank nullity theorem, we got some relation of this kind. Okay, option 1 and 2, if you closely look at the option 1 and 2, that says that we are discussing these things in R5. Okay, so R5 means n is 5. When your n is 5, your m is 5 upon 2. This cannot be a dimension at all. Okay, so no such transformation can exist in R5 with this property. So option 2 is true. Okay, when n is 6, then your m is 3. Yeah, fine. In that case, there can exist a transformations holding this property. So what we have used here? Just diagonality theorem. That's it, nothing else. Okay. Moving to the next question. Here V is given to be a finite dimensional vector space over R, and T from V to V is defined as a linear map. We are writing this T as a composition of two things, where T1 is defined from V to W and T2 is defined from W to V. And this W is also some finite dimensional vector space. Okay. Basically, let me consider, since this notation T is used here, let me consider some mapping V to W. When can it be 1 1? If this linear transformation is 1 1, then the dimension of this V should be smaller than or equals dimension of W. Okay. Similarly, this can be onto if and only if dimension of W dimension of V should be bigger than or equals dimension of W. Okay, a linear transformation can be 1 1 on 1 1 or onto if and only if the following condition is satisfied. Okay, now can we always write T in this fashion for some linear maps? Basically, this T1 and T2 are given to be linear maps. Okay, which of the following can be true? That is what we'll have to examine. Suppose let us take T1 is onto. Okay, let us take T1 is onto. In this case, what happens? Dimension of V is bigger than or equals dimension of W. Right? So this is happening here. So in this case, this very well tells that T2 cannot be onto, but T1, what? T1 is, T1 can be 1 1. Right? Because if it has to be 1 1, dimension of the domain should be smaller than or equals dimension of the codomain. For T1, sorry, not T1, T2. T2 is onto. T2 cannot be on. This T2 cannot be onto, but it can be 1 1. Similarly, when you take this T1 as 1 1, then what happens? Dimension of V is smaller than or equals dimension of W. In this case, your T2 cannot be 1 1, but T2 can be onto. So when we choose, actually this T2 can be, instead of us we shall write can be 1 1, and this can be onto. So basically when we choose the mapping T1 as onto, the option 1 claims that both can be onto. That is not the case. Only when T1 is onto, if T2 is 1 1, then that's fine. So option 3 and 4 are true in this case. Just you'll have to, what if the linear map is 1 1, then what do we have about their dimension? You just think about it, with which we can obtain one result. And when it is on 1 1, then what happens? Just these ideas are enough, right? Moving to the next question. Here A is given to be a 3 by 3 complex matrix, and we'll have to examine which of the following are correct statements. Okay, so basically what they do here is they are multiplying this -1 to the power I plus j with aij and form a matrix. Okay, how would this matrix look like? -1 square a11 minus 1 cube a12 minus 1 to the power 4 a13 and minus 1 to the power 3 a11 minus 1 to the power 4 a21 a22 and this is minus 1 to the power 5 a23 minus 1 to the power 4 a31 minus 1 to the power 5 a32 minus 1 to the power 6 a33, right? So this is what I have, and the other matrix minus 1 to the, sorry, it is not minus 1, it is minus square root of 1 is I, right? So I to the power I plus j aij, this is another matrix. So this is I squared a11 I cube a12 I power 4 a13 and this is I cube a21 I power 4 a22 I power 5 a23 and I power 4 a31 I power 5 a32 I power 6 a33. This is what we have, isn't it? Now we'll have to examine the determinant of this matrix. So when we take the determinant of this quantity, if you see, I am able to take minus 1 square from the entire first row. This I can very well take. From the second row, I am taking minus 1 cube, and from the third row, I am taking minus 1 to the power 4 outside. So what I am finally left with is a11, a21, a31. Here I have just taken minus 1 square outside. So it would be minus 1 a12 minus 1 square a13, right? Here I have taken minus 1 cube outside. So here also I would be left with these quantities. So these are just properties of the determinants. I am just using the properties of determinant a33. Now what is this? This is minus 1, right? So product of all these things is simply minus 1, and now I can take minus 1 outside from the second column, entire from the second column, and minus 1 square from the third column. If I take these things outside, what I am left with is simply the determinant of A. So this sums up, this products up to 1. So this is determinant A. Hence option 1 is true. And here, using the similar idea, if you take I square from the first row, I cube from the second row, I power 4 from the third row, the determinant of I to the power I plus j, this I is iota, okay, complex I, and we have a11 I a12 I square a13 a21 I a22 I square a23 and this is a31 I a32 I square a33. Okay, now this all products up to what? Simply I. You can very well check I power 5 I power 9, I power 9 is simply I only, right? So then this, from here you can very well take I from the second column, I square from the third column. So it is I square I cube, and you would have determinant of A only. So all this sums up to I power 6 determinant of A. So I power 6 is what? Simply I square, which is minus determinant of A, right? Just make sure that we have not made any mistakes here. 7 9, so that is I, yeah, yeah. So option 4. So these are the ideas. Are you, if you have this matrix and if you are able to perform it just by expanding along some row or column to find the determinant. Yes, that also you can very well do, but applying properties to examine these things would be the better option, right? Okay, now we'll move to the next question. The next question is p of x is given to be a non-constant polynomial of degree n bigger than or equals 1. So clearly it is a non-constant polynomial, right? It means at least one of the a1, a2 till an is non-zero. Okay, at least one of this a1 through an is non-zero. Okay, and the polynomial q of x is asked to be considered as integral of the given polynomial, and r of x is the derivative of this polynomial. So basically our q of x would be what? A naught x, a1 x square upon 2, a2 x cube upon 3, etc. till an x power n plus 1 upon n plus 1, and this r of x is the derivative, right? So a1 2a2x 3a2x, sorry, 3a3x square till n an x power n minus 1. Now we'll have to examine the linear dependence and independence of these quantities. Okay, so in order to check whether these two are linearly independent or dependent, you can check one is the constant scalar multiple of the other or not. If it is not so, that is not going to happen. Okay, so here let me check degree of q of x, which is n plus 1, provided an is non-zero. Okay, okay, greater than or equals n plus 1, less than or equals n plus 1, because my p of x is a non-constant polynomial, so I don't know what is the degree of p, right? If degree of p of x is m, okay, let me choose this m to be smaller than or equals n. Okay, if let me take this way m, so the correspondingly the coefficient am would be there. Okay, the along with that am I would have upon integration we are able to see the degree of q of x is m plus 1, and this degree of r of x would be m minus 1. So these two polynomials are of different degree, hence they cannot be linearly dependent. So they are linearly independent. Okay, through scalar multiplication you cannot obtain one from the other. Okay, now option 2 was discarded anyway. Now we will have to examine option 3 and 4, for which what should we check? We should check this x power n belong to the span of q of x and r of x or not. Suppose x power n belong, okay, this is to check. Suppose it is true, then what happens? This x power n can be written as a qx. Okay, a is used, so alpha qx plus beta r of x, right? Okay, in this case what is going to happen? This alpha product with your entire thing, a n minus 1 x power n upon n plus a n x power n plus 1 upon n plus 1 plus beta times of a1 2a2x etc. till n an x power n minus 1. Okay, so we are checking this x power n is a member or not. That is what we are checking, right? Here the only constant term is this beta a1, that is 0, that has to be 0, right? And for x we have alpha a naught plus beta 2 beta a2 should be equal to 0. Okay, these stuff are there, and this an minus 1 upon n alpha times of this has to be equal to 1. Okay, this has to be equal to 1. That is what we will get when we equate the coefficient of x power n. This is what we would get, and this alpha times of an upon n plus 1 should be equal to 0. This is also we are getting. So all of the quantities should be equal to 0, and this is what we are getting. And this a power n minus 1, can we get a relation for this a power a n minus 1? So n minus 1 times of, here we don't have, okay, here n minus 2. I need this a n minus 1 quantity, so that would be n minus 1. A n minus 1 is the thing I need. Yeah, so a n minus 1 from the second term, and from the first one, if I look for that one, okay, this would be the coefficient of x power n minus 2, right here. So here the coefficient of x power n minus 2 would be a n minus 3 upon n minus 3. Okay, so this should be equal to 0. So actually here you would get some recursive thing. This alpha and beta are scalars that can be any scalars. We'll have to basically identify those things. Okay, if we are looking for x power n to be in this span, we must get this an to be non-zero. Okay, when your an is to be non-zero, then from this what you get is your alpha should be equal to 0. Okay, when your alpha is 0, you just put everything here. Okay, when your alpha should be equal to 0. So this is what you get. When you get your alpha as 0, you just put the value of alpha in every other thing. You would get beta is also 0. Okay, that cannot be true. So this is not possible. Okay, suppose if it is true, you just check you just see what happens. You would obtain both the scalars are 0. That cannot be true. Okay, the same goes with option 4 as well. So only one is true. Moving to the next question, here we have a ring of n by n matrices over R. Then we'll have to examine which of the following are true. Okay. Now, if you look at the option 4, okay, actually we'll have to go through all the options. Okay. The first option claims that there exist two matrices A and B such that AB minus BA can be written as this is identity matrix. Okay, and second option claims that if we take two matrices in the ring and if they commute, then A is diagonalizable over R if and only if B is diagonalizable over R. The third option claims that any two matrices, if we choose any two matrices from the ring and if we make the two different products AB and BA, they'll have the same minimal polynomial. Option 4 says that they'll have the same eigenvalues. Okay, so we know that CAB of x is same as that of CBA of x if A and B are square matrices of same order. If they share a same, if the characteristic polynomial are equal, then they have same eigenvalues. So this is a straightforward result. Okay, we don't have to prove or check anything for option 4. Okay, now let me choose if they have same eigenvalues. That does not imply that they Your minimal polynomial are also same. Let us choose A to be 0, 1, 0, 0 and B to be 1, 0, 0, 0. So my AB would be what? AB would be a 0 polynomial, sorry, 0 matrix, and BA is 0, 1, 0, 0. You are very well able to see that both the matrices will have 0 as the eigenvalue. Eigenvalues are same, but matrix AB, the minimal polynomial of this matrix AB is x, and the minimal polynomial of this BA is x squared. So option 3 is wrong. Okay, with the same examples, okay, we are not getting AB same as that of BA, right? Okay, choose your A to be identity matrix and B to be 0, 1, 0, 0. The reason why I chose A to be the identity matrix is it is identity matrix. It will commute with every other matrices. Okay, the property is satisfied. A is here diagonalizable. Since B is a non-zero nilpotent matrix, it is not diagonalizable. So option 2 is wrong. Okay. From here, now treat this as a single matrix and this as a single matrix. If it is true, then eigenvalues of AB minus BA should be equal to 1. But every eigenvalue of AB minus BA is 0. Why? Because BA and AB will have same set of eigenvalues. In that case, every eigenvalue of AB minus BA should be equal to 0. Okay. Yeah. Instead of giving that is equal to identity matrix, if they have given us some 0 matrix, yes, it is possible. 0 matrix are some non-zero nilpotent matrices. We can very well manipulate with this the matrices A and B to get matrices of that sort. Okay, the right hand side, instead of identity matrix, we should have some matrix which has only eigenvalues 0. So in that case, there is a chance, right? So option 1 is also false here. Moving to the next question, we are asked to consider a 5 by 5 matrix such that entry of the matrix is given in this form. Okay, then in which of the following cases A is a positive definite matrix, right? So instead of talking it for the 5 by 5 matrices, we can very well talk it for the 3 by 3 matrices, and the same shall be extended to the 5 by 5 matrices, right? So Ni is chosen to be I. Okay, so in that case, what would be the matrix A? The matrix would be 1 upon 2, 1 upon 3, 1 upon 4, 1 upon 3, 1 upon 4, 1 upon 5, 1 upon 4, 1 upon 5, and 1 upon 6. Okay, so the principal minus has to be positive if the matrix is positive definite. So checking the positive definiteness, what are the ways of checking the positive? Clearly, it is a symmetric matrix. If all the eigenvalues are positive, then it is positive definite. Okay, but checking eigenvalues here is not possible, and else you will have to identify a quadratic form and see whether it is always positive for a non-zero x. This is by definition. This is also not possible. And the other way is we can check the determinant of this one, and this one. But since it involves fraction values, let us put that in hold. The other way is identify the principal minus. Okay, hope you got the idea of how to evaluate the principal minus. Actually, we'll have to examine the principal minus. The first principal minus is the determinant of this matrix. So it is 1 upon 24 minus 1 upon 25, which is positive. Okay, and the principal minor, if I fix this one, then I would find this one 1 upon 12 minus 1 upon 16, which is also positive. Okay, then this principal minor, this is 1 upon 8 minus 1 upon 9, which is positive again. Hence all the things are positive, right? So we are done, right? This is a positive definite. In this case, it is a positive definite. You can very well extend this for the 5 by 5 matrices as well. Now let me choose n1. When we choose ni as I, it is clear that n1 is smaller than n2, which is smaller than n3, till okay, smaller than n4, which is smaller than n5. So we have examined that case as well. It is again a positive definite. When you choose every value are equal, then you would get what? For simplicity, let me choose all these are equal to some I. Okay, let me not fix value, let it be I. So it is 2i plus 1, 1 upon 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 2i plus 1, and the same row is repeated, right? So this is a matrix of order 1. Sorry, this is a matrix with rank 1. Okay, matrix with rank 1 means what? Of course 0 is one of the eigenvalue, hence it cannot be positive definite, right? Okay, let us reverse it. This is what we have, right? So in that case, let me choose n1 to be 5, n1 to be 3, 2. This case, let us consider. What do we get? We would get 1 upon 6 here. Okay, 1 upon 5, 1 upon 4, 1 upon 5, 1 upon 4, 1 upon 3, 1 upon 4, 1 upon 3, 1 upon 2. Here, let us again check it. So 1 upon 8 minus 1 upon 9, which is positive, the first one. And for the second one, it would be 1 upon 12 minus 1 upon 16, which is again positive. And this 1 upon 24 minus 1 upon 25, which is positive. In this case also, we are getting A to be a positive definite matrix. Okay. Moving to the next question. A standard inner product is the one that we are going to consider in this case. It is defined from R into R into R. And for non-zero W in Rn, we are defining a map TW in this fashion. Okay. And let us now examine the options. The first option says that determinant of this is 1. Okay. To check the first option, let me choose my V1 to be 1, 0, V2 to be 0, 1, and I am choosing W also to be 1, 0. Then what is TW of V1? It is 1, 0 minus 2 times of inner product 1, 0, comma 1, 0 with 1, 0, 1, 0 WW product with W. So these two gets cancelled, and this is 1, 0 minus 2 comma 0. So this is minus 1 comma 0. Okay, and TW of V2, it is 0, 1 minus 2 times of 0, 1 comma 1, 0, 1, 0 comma 1, 0 product with 1, 0. So this quantity is 0, so we get 0, 1 only. and when we put them in a matrix, that is tw of v1 comma tw of v2, when you put that in a matrix you would get 1 0 0 1. So clearly determinant of tw is -1, which is not 0. Okay, no matter, actually the general tw, that is what we have to speak. We have chosen a particular case and we saw that the determinant is not happening to be 1, so it cannot happen in general, right? Okay, now we move to the second option. So inner product of tw of v1 comma tw of v2, v1 minus 2 times of v1 comma w upon w comma w, and v2 minus 2 times of v2 comma w upon w comma w. So now we'll have to make use of the inner product properties. Okay, when you apply the properties of inner product, actually this v1 with v2, this v1 with this quantity, and this quantity with v2, and this quantity with the last quantity, and finally terms gets cancelled up and you would end up with v1 v2. How the terms are getting cancelled, that let me explain you. So when you make this one with this one, you would get inner product w comma v2. Since we are talking in rn, you can write it as, instead of writing w comma v2, this is same as that of v2 comma w. Okay, when this happens, and when this v1, when you make this quantity, that time you would get v1 comma w. Here you have v1 comma w, and you get v2 comma w also. Here already you have v2 comma w, then you would get v1 comma w. In both the terms you have this -2. Okay, so finally you would be add up with -4, and when you make the this combination, this with this, you would have minus times of -2 with -2, that becomes +4, and v1w is there, v2w is there. This would be double inner product w comma w, and in the denominator, instead of having one w comma w, you would have w comma w twice. So whatever is getting in the numerator will get cancelled by the denominator, so the terms will get cancelled, and finally you would be left with v1 comma v2. So that is option 2. Option 2 is true. Okay, now we move to the third option. Okay, so in order to prove the third option, what we have is tw of v. Let us take it as u. Therefore tw inverse of u would be what? V. We should get it back to v. Okay, so v minus 2 times of inner product v comma w upon w comma w. W is u. So from which our v is u plus 2 times of v comma w upon w comma w. Let us mark this as equation 1. Now when we have v is u, so from this what we get is tw of v comma w. This is nothing but u comma w, right? So that is inner product v1 comma w, sorry, v comma w minus 2 times of v comma w upon w comma w, and this would form with w comma w, which is equal to u comma w. We just substituted the value of this tw of v. Okay, so this is what we are getting, and here this and this gets cancelled. Vw minus 2 times of vw is minus v comma w, which is same as that of u comma w. Okay, let us mark this as equation 2. And what we have is tw inverse of u is v. Okay, what is our v? That is u plus 2 times of v comma w upon w comma w product with w, right? So we have substituted this one, and minus v comma w can be written like this. So it is u times of minus u minus 2 times of u comma w upon w comma w is w. So which is nothing but tw of u, right? So u is an arbitrary quantity, hence tw is same as that of tw inverse. So that is also true, right? Now to examine the fourth option, t2w. In every place of w you will have to substitute 2w, 2 times of v comma 2w upon 2w comma 2w with 2w. It is v minus, here you have 2, here 2, 2, 8, 8 upon 4, that is 2 vw upon ww and w. So this is what you are getting, right? So this is basically what, this is your tw. This cannot be equal to 2 times of tw. So option 4 is wrong. Moving to the last question. Here the matrix A is given, okay, over the field of rationals, and which of the following matrices are of the form P transpose AP for a suitable invertible matrix P over Q, which means if this P is an invertible matrix, then this one P transpose AP and A are conjugate matrices. If they are conjugate matrices, then like you can very well form and they are symmetric too. Here they are since A is symmetric, of course the conjugate matrices will be symmetric. So you basically have to examine the isomorphism of these two things. Okay, isomorphism of the quadratic forms associated with these matrices. Identify the rank and signature. Okay, the rank of A is 2 and the signature is 1 plus 1 minus, that is 1 minus 1, which is 0. Okay, here the rank is 2, signature is 1 minus 1, which is 0. Here the rank is 2, signature is simply 2 minus 0, that is 2. And here the rank is 2, signature is 1 minus 1, which is 0. Here the rank is 2 again, and the signature is 1 minus 1, which is 0. So over Q is the thing that we are talking. Q is a subset of R, so we will have to examine both the rank and signature. The rank and signature matches for 1, 3 and 4. Hence these three are the right answers. Thank you.